Welcome, everybody. My name is Brian O'Leary. I'm the Executive Director of the Book Industry Study Group. We're glad to have you today to participate in our webinar, Tackling Counterfeit Products and Making AI Opt-out Statements. These are use cases for the ISCC declarations, the ISCC, of course, being the International Standard Content Code. We're fortunate today to have two folks who are really qualified to talk about this topic. The first is Sebastian Poth, who's co-founder of both Lyceum.com and the ISCC Foundation. As well, he's joined by Lisa McCloy-Kelly, who is both Senior Vice President Director of Digital Product Development and Operations at Penguin Random House, as well as co-chair of the Publishing Business Group for the W3C. She also chairs its Anti-Counterfeit Task Force, which is a joint effort involving the Publishing Business Group and another part of the W3C. They put together their thoughts in a presentation that Sebastian's going to lead us through. And we'll have time at the end, probably about 20 minutes plus or minus, for questions, comments, and any other inquiry that you might have on the topic. Thanks for being here, Sebastian and Lisa, and I'll turn it over to you, Sebastian.
Thanks, Brian, for the introduction. Hello, good evening, good morning. It's a pleasure to be here to talk about use cases of ISCC. You have introduced me, so I can skip this this slide and go directly into the presentation. Some of you may have already heard of ISCC, the International Standard Content Code, which is an upcoming identifier standard for digital media content. And today I would like to tell you a bit more about the ISCC. However, this won't be a technical session. Much more, I'd like to approach the ISCC from the perspective of two use cases. First, the issue of counterfeit product listings on online retail platforms. And second, the issue of AI system providers who are using your content on a massive scale to train their language models. It's really hard to keep up with news these days regarding the development of tools and services based on large language models for generative AI. If we look at images, billions of them have already been generated by AI, and it's really not hard to foresee the consequences of this abundance, where it will become really hard for users, for platforms, but even for the AI providers themselves to distinguish which content has been generated by AI systems or human creators. It's not only in the interest of creators and rights holders to mark exactly that distinction and promote genuine human-created works while facing an overwhelming flood of AI-generated content. Another aspect must be mentioned in the context of AI, that creators and rights holders from all media sectors and parts of the world are quite unhappy about the fact that their content is being trained upon by AI providers without their explicit consent, and they wish to have a say on whether their copyright-protected works are being trained upon. Any day from now, we can expect the final version of the European AI Act to be published. And most certainly it will bring more transparency for consumers, which is appreciated. And most likely it will also bring clarity on a most urgent question, what copyright protected works have been trained, have been used to train these models. There are numerous lawsuits that have been brought against generative AI companies from the rights holders, especially in the US. And while I approach this topic from a European perspective, I'm keen to understand your viewpoints, and we may have a conversation about that after this presentation. So how do you perceive the potential outcomes of these lawsuits? Is it likely that fair use regime is even touched, or what options do rights holders in the US actually have to prevent AI from training on their content without proper authorization? Another use case for ISCC came up while discussing the problem of counterfeit content. So in several markets, just like the US, in France, in Italy, or Germany, excuse me, there's a growing concern regarding the presence of potentially illegitimate and fraudulent content listings on book retail platforms. And this issue touches both printed books and ebooks, where potentially fake accounts are offering and selling content they may not have the rights to. To give a bit of an overview about the variants in which counterfeit content is offered on book retail platforms. First, we can see that entire books, the original content is republished by fake accounts who use the same, similar or different authors or publishers' names, title metadata, or cover images to deceive the customers. And there are cases where parts of the original content have been offered to buyers while the rest of the book has been locked behind a paywall. And there are reports of fake content or cases where fake accounts offer their own content, but they use the brands and cover images that are same or similar to very popular titles or bestsellers to deceive the customers. The publishing community group of the W3C set up a task force, and under the leadership of Lisa McCloy-Kelly, the group has been coming together on a regular basis to, on the one hand, raise awareness of the issue, discuss the use cases that I just presented to you, or discuss potential countermeasures. And these countermeasures have the objective to enable a swift identification of potentially illegitimate and fraudulent content listings. Such detection would then facilitate a faster response to mitigate the issue. But ultimately, of course, the goal is to proactively prevent these listings altogether. The important question that we also discussed in the task force is, or has been, how can we effectively tackle the problem? And when we look at the variants, it becomes evident that fake listings frequently employ visual elements, particularly near duplicate cover images, to deceive users. And therefore, if we can swiftly identify instances where the same or similar cover images are used by accounts other than the original publisher, this could then serve as a red flag. However, to effectively identify fake listings, it's crucial for anyone to be able to determine the original listing. And this is actually where publishers must take action and play an active role by making public and verifiable declarations of the original content to establish kind of a clear and verifiable reference point that enables the detection of these fraudulent listings. So verifiable declarations of original content could potentially address a number of issues. Among them, as mentioned, the tackling of counterfeit products by providing reference to the original publication or making public declarations of, in the other case, authentic human-generated content that should not be used for training AI. And verifiable declarations of original content can be achieved by inseparably and persistently binding metadata, rights, or other claims to the actual media files without relying on watermarks or embedding of metadata. And furthermore, users and platforms should be able to easily identify the source the creator or the holder of rights for digital media. This, if you want to call it trust infrastructure, is based on two novel and upcoming standards. First, the W3C recommendation for cryptographically verifiable credentials, enabling the identification of creators and rights holders. And second, it's based on the International Standard Content Code, which is a new and open and decentralized identifier and a lightweight fingerprinting system designed specifically for digital media content across all media types. Let me give you a bit of background about the development of the ISCC, which is a standard that actually originated in international book publishing. So the development of the ISCC began in 2017 and was proposed to ISO in 2019 by DIN, the German standards organization. And after 4.5 years now of committee works at TC46SC9, together with registered experts from 29 countries, from all media sectors, going through all the necessary stages and ballots of the ISO standards tracks, 2 weeks ago, ISCC was accepted as draft international standard, DIS. And today, this afternoon, my time, this morning, your time, the ISO working group met to do the last bits of editing to eventually come up with the final standard document for publication, which will most likely happen in the coming weeks. Let's take a look at an example of the ISCC. What is interesting is that unlike established ISO content identifiers, the ISCC is generated directly from the digital media file, so eliminating the need for a manual application and management of the identifier. Each digital media file has its unique DNA, which serves its purpose, as you can see, obviously, in machine-to-machine data exchange rather than human readability. While I won't dive into the technical details of the ISCC in this presentation, I would like to highlight two relevant aspects. Firstly, generating the code can be done by anyone with access to the digital media file. And second, the ISCC is, as you can see, a multi-composite identifier that combines so-called cryptographic hashing that allows to verify the integrity and see if the file was changed with similarity preserving hashes in the other code units. Notably, as you can see, the first three units enable a matching of near duplicate content, which means that if you have different versions of the same work or content in different file formats or slightly modified or manipulated content or content that has been stripped of its metadata or slightly other modifications, the identifiers will be distinct, but there's a high likelihood that they will match. Thus, ISCC supports the efficient detection of near duplicate content and ensuring content integrity at the same time. Let's have a look at one example to better understand the capabilities of ISCC. On the left, we have cover images from a book that I published. And for the purpose of this demo, I applied a color modification to the original image. And despite the manipulation of the cover, the second component of the ISCC, as you can see here, the content code, which assesses the perceptual similarity of the two images, still finds a match. And this would mean that anyone with access to the content, to the one or the other image or cover image, could match one or the other image. So from the fake cover, you can match the original, and the other way around, from the original cover image, you could identify fake cover images. And this clustering and matching of near duplicate content is possible only by having access to the codes. So third-party services like anti-piracy services or other services that you may that you may be working with, they do not have to have access to the content to match these content-derived identifiers. ISCC supports a wide range of common file formats from all media types and sectors. So in our context, the same identifier can be used for ebooks, audiobooks, or and their cover images. Let's summarize the main innovations of ISCC. As said before, all machines or users with access to the content can generate the code from the media file. With the ISCC, they can confirm integrity or match near duplicate content, even when content has been altered, manipulated, or metadata watermarks have been stripped. And if publishers or other rights holders now make public declarations of their codes, it allows the persistent binding of metadata, rights, or other information to the media asset. And persistent means, obviously, the data cannot be removed. Each media sector can use their own metadata scheme, for example, to bind information to the content. So news outlets can attach IPTC photo metadata to press photos. Book publishers can use Onyx to describe their content, and record labels use the DDEX metadata standard to provide metadata within the retail chain for their content. You can inseparably bind rights or license offerings, connect peer reviews, statistics, reporting data, whatever you want to make, whatever you want to bind to the content. And in recent discussion, the most relevant use case has been the ability to inseparably bind opt-out declarations to your content to inform providers of AI software that they must not use your content for AI training purposes. Let's dive a bit deeper into the topic of AI. So as we can identify 3 use cases of ISCC in the context of artificial intelligence. And the first and foremost use case is that using ISCC, creators and rights holders can inseparably bind the opt-out declarations to the content with the goal to restrict the use of their content as data for training AI and large language models. This, by the way, refers directly to Article 4 of the European Directive on Copyright. Providers of AI applications can then derive the opt-out statement from the ISCC that they generated before they train on content and thus respect their legal restrictions. Obviously, the most relevant question to you and the legal experts that may be in the audience would be to whether such an opt-out declaration could become a kind of a de facto standard in the US as well, instead of kind of suggesting a robots TXT-like approach. And if we look at a blog post presented last week, a couple of days ago, by OpenAI, which suggests the GPT bot for web published content because they want to be good citizens, as they say. It's hard to understand whether that could work for book publishers, because their suggested method, however, only works for more or less reliably for web publish content. And book publishers obviously usually do not publish their content online. So it would be crucial to kind of suggest OpenAI and tell them about a new way of resolving opt-out declarations that would be bound to the content itself, and ask them if they would like to be good citizens using that method. I think that would be an interesting discussion. The second use case of ISCC and AI may arise from the obligation under the upcoming and revised European AI Act, because the novel regulation will require providers of generative AI to make publicly available a sufficiently detailed summary of content used for training the general purpose model. Not only ICC, using ICC providers can actually fulfill these future European regulatory requirements, but it would be kind of interesting to see whether your content or the content which is published in the US will appear in these lists that need to be published publicly according to the AI Act. I have to say that the AI Act kind of has leaked only. It's not published yet, but we expect that to be published in the coming days. None the least, and I come to an end almost, is that we believe that AI system providers themselves will use ISCC and generate codes to publicly mark and identify AI-generated content. This is a big topic for among the AI companies themselves, not only to increase the trustworthiness of the digital media landscape, but because it's in the self-interest of the AI providers. They must not train on their own output. They must prevent AI-generated output from being used to train the models, as this will, as you can see in this image, pretty quickly lead to what is called a model collapse or AI entropy. So once you have a human with 3 legs in your model, it's very hard to untrain this. So I would assume that in the future, AI providers will generate ISCC codes before they use your content for training for 3 reasons. First, to make sure that they are not training on AI-generated content. Second, to make sure that there's no opt-out declaration from a rights holder attached to the content. And third, to come up with a sufficiently detailed lists of works they used for training. So how can publishers get going, so to speak? So I think with it only takes 4 simple steps for publishers to make ISCC declarations for the various use cases. First, generate ISCC codes from cover images, PDF files, EPUB files, audiobook files. Then second, select metadata and rights management information per use case that you want to support. 3, add digital certificates or verifiable credentials to the content that help to identify and authorize your claim. And 4, make a public declarations. And as a proof of concept that this model will work, we developed the Lithium Trust Engine, which is one of potentially many applications that allow to generate and declare ISCC codes and bind opt-out declaration to the content, which was supported by a grant from the European Commission. I would assume that ISCC declaration will become a new best practice standard for creators and rights holders, and that the asset or title management software that you all are using will do that out of the box within the coming 10 years. So it will become it's fairly simple to implement that, and that is certainly something that you should discuss with your software provider. I also assume that creators and rights holders will use cryptographically verifiable credentials for attribution. VCs, as they are called, are first a W3C standard, and the implementation of verifiable credentials is pushed massively by policymakers around the world, in the US as well as in Europe. And with the Creator Credentials project, we are developing like an identity management framework that is addressing the needs of the creative communities that want to make like public declaration of their original content. This is currently a work in progress, but if you're interested to learn more, feel free to reach out. Let me come to the end and just show you like the 3 or 4 steps that we just mentioned. So you would start with a cover image. You would take your cover image, generate an ISCC code, then you can select the AI opt-out policy to be attached and bound. The third step is that you digitally sign your public declaration using your credentials that you can attach to provide authority to your signature. And then this declaration is now accessible. So these for humans and for machines, as you can see, content must not be used for AI training purposes. And this is like just to show you a bit of a technical view how that would look like. Like this is like a JSON file that can be bound to the public declaration. And usually this is really the part where I would like to basically show you that this actually works. And I hope it does. A live demo in a presentation with a lot of participants is always a very, very big risk. But just to show you that this is the cover image that I provided. This is the ISCC that has been generated from the media file. I can provide basic metadata that come from the title management systems. I provide key IPTC metadata because I assumed that this would be a photography or like an image. Where I can put something like a creator name or credit lines and the digital source type to it, where you can define whether it's AI generated or human generated. And if just to show you how that then would work, if you make an update on the metadata, so I will just enter the current time. My local time is 1929 as a keyword for that declaration. I save that entry, and now I can make a public declaration of that cover image. I declare. It will now ask me to digitally sign that declaration. And what happens now is that it publicly includes the ISCC code and the metadata that you just have provided and packaged in this transaction to a registry. In this case, it's a blockchain, but it doesn't need to be a blockchain. Blockchain means always that it will take a few seconds in order to kind of propagate. But now you have seen that the transaction went through. And what you can do now then is to have like this use case. You have any kind of Twitter user, this could be an AI service, or it could be a blog, or it could be a piracy site where you absolutely have no clue who posted that image. And as you can see, it's also the manipulated image. But you can use this browser extension and resolve the original declaration from the original publisher, which has this verifiable credential here. And as you can see, this 1929, which I just entered, can be resolved by any machine or any user or any retailer or any platform in real time. So it's a live update of a database that is accessible to anyone in real time. So just to go back, the last slide, because that's basically what the AI providers would do. The AI providers would generate the code from the media file and generate it locally. Then they would discover the opt-out declaration and hopefully respect that. Let me just show you like how the opt-out declaration can be retrieved. So this is like the human readable version, and with the declaration metadata, you will find then the policy for AI training, where you say, please do not train on your content, on my content in this case. So you have all the metadata, title, description, keywords, creator names, the verifiable credential that are cryptographically verifiable. And the interesting part, and then I stop this presentation, is that you also can kind of get from this image on any website and claim your content by making this declaration. And the redirect link, you can then point to any kind of page where you want the customer or the user to be when they come across your cover image on the internet. So this kind of leads back to the original use case that we defined, where we have counterfeit products that use visual components or same or similar content in order to promote fake offerings. It would be possible to kind of not only redirect them to the original listing, but also inform the retailers about the original listings. And on the other hand, even if the content is shared, even if the content is manipulated, even if the metadata got stripped away, even if the watermark gets stripped away, AI can do exactly the same and use this API to receive the verifiable original declaration that tells AI that content must not be used for AI training purposes. So this is just like summarizing and ending the presentation for now.
And thank you, Sebastian. And if you want to leave up your contact information for a minute, I thought it might be helpful to just take a moment, Lisa, if you would, to talk about the work that has been going on in the task force, on the anti-counterfeiting task force, because it's not just the ISCC, obviously, but an overall approach to the topic.
So we've been talking about use cases in the task force for almost a year now, and it seems that everybody is dealing with some amount of counterfeiting that is beyond what we used to see, with content being stolen and put up on, repositories and shared out. Now there is a much more active amount of content that is stolen and then resold, and trying to identify that content for most publishers and for the partners that they are using to try to help them fight counterfeits is really a game of whack-a-mole. And so we were looking for what kinds of technologies were out there, what kinds of things were being developed. And we looked at several different possible solutions. And certainly this one is not the only thing, but this is the first thing we've seen that really helps in that scenario where something is counterfeited and changed enough that looking for something to be a duplicate has made it hard to get every partner in that trust chain to actually be able to slow this down, to possibly stop it. And as Sebastian was showing you, that comparison with whether it be with a cover or an audio file or an EPUB, to be able to actually identify what is close but not necessarily exactly the same, has really a great potential to be able to help fight this. It is certainly something that each publisher can't do in a vacuum. It will take the concerted effort of a lot of parties to make this happen, but we really feel confident in the task force that we've been looking at something that has great potential and is at a point of being real enough to start being implemented. And that's where we are now, is starting to have conversations with more publishers, with more retailers, and to start to figure out how to test the possibility of implementation.
We have several questions, and during the presentation, one of the participants, Pamela Malpas, raised her hand. I've unmuted you or allowed you to talk, Pamela. So if you want to unmute yourself and either make an observation or pose a question, you can.
I'd just like to say that this is a really exciting development to me. I think it's a lot of the discussions around AI scraping and use of copyrighted materials is now taking the direction of what licensing mechanisms might operate for opt-in. But this to me is a really interesting use case for how opt-out might actually function and actually be possible for authors who up until now have really been hampered from actually being able to opt out.
And Pamela, would you be comfortable sharing with the group, or those who are on the webinar today, your affiliation with AALA?
Sure. Yeah. Yes. Of course. I am the chair of the copyright committee at the Association of American Literary Agents, and part of our AI working group. So we're very much engaged in talking and thinking about these changes in the publishing landscape and what it means for copyright holders and content creators. Yeah, this is a terrific presentation. Really glad to be learning all of this.
Thanks for being here today.
I would note that though we've been really talking here about opt-out, the same technology, the same mechanism can be used to note an opt-in.
Correct. I would like to confirm that the opt-out, the focus on the opt-out is only that the European directive only currently speaks of the opt-out. So we didn't want to, it should be a separate, in our opinion, in our legal kind of implementation, it's a separate step to kind of say no, and then we start negotiating from that perspective. So you also, as a publisher, I would assume, have a different stance and a different position when your content is not freely accessible out there without any kind of opt-out. So the first step would be basically to say no, and then you can start dealing with the opt-in in that order, I would say. But that's obviously a strategic aspect.
Right. I was just going to go to some of the questions. Edson was asking if ISCC works together with the C2PA
Yes.
standards from Adobe, and is there overlap with what they do?
Yes, I'm glad that you put forward this question. The answer is clearly yes, and we try to show that as soon as possible. The point. So you can see it like in the application that we already have a plugin prepared where you can basically generate the manifest and embed it into the media asset itself. That's the way C2PA would do it. So they would have claims like these metadata, a history of changes, and they are packaged and digitally signed, which is very important to do that, because then we have identity, notion of identity entity within the claim. And then this is embedded into the media asset, plus in addition to the public declaration, where the manifest is also externally. The problem that we are solving is what C2PA calls soft binding. The problem is, if you upload this cover images or any C2PA kind of modified content to Twitter, the metadata gets stripped away. And then all your manifests and your signatures and everything that you put in to the content is gone. And with this solution, you can have a reference to the external manifest store by creating an ISCC code. Then that ISCC code will direct you to the metadata that will direct you to the C2PA manifest. So the answer is yes, we hope to show it as soon as possible.
And Lisa, I imagine C2PA is active within your group as well.
We've been talking to them, and we've been talking about the ability to use these two things separately or in conjunction. Yes.
Great. Thank you.
C2PA also has already mentioned ISCC in their technical specification, so you can find it under the section of soft binding. But there hasn't so far been any real-world implementation. I think we will be the first one that will show that it works.
Great. Appreciate the depth on the background. That's a really full answer to the question. Jane was asking Sebastian, she noticed that when you added 1929 to the record, that there was appeared to be a fee attached. Is the fee structure set for the system? And what is the per action pricing, at least at the moment?
Yeah, that's also a very good question, and it's important to say. So when we started the project, it kind of derived from a Web3 context where we intended to use blockchain as a ledger for the declarations, as a public and immutable ledger for the declarations. And so what you see here when you make a declaration and it will ask you for the signature, the fees that will pop up at this stage are actually transaction fees for the blockchain networks. This is, I think, what you have been referring to. However, the point that we discovered is that if we are talking to companies that have millions or hundreds of millions of assets and ISCC codes that they want to declare, blockchain is not the right registry for you. So we are currently working on off-chain registry that have the same properties of blockchain, which is they can they have a timestamp that is verifiable, and they allow to verify the digital signature that replicate these two main features of blockchain with a federated declaration infrastructure. So the costs will then be marginal for the declarations. They are also for blockchain. It's like this transaction would have cost maybe 5 cents or between 2 and 5 cents per declaration, per signature. However, that's too much if you have 1 million assets that you want to declare. And so we go off chain and leave blockchain for what it is and try to find solutions that are as effective and secure.
I'm going to jump around a little bit and ask Joanna's question about if the original work, if this cover, for example, didn't yet have an ISCC declaration, what stops a counterfeit product from being declared as the original? I mean, how do you manage that?
I think that's also a very good question, and so it could be cases where you have two declaring parties. So in this case, this image that you can see, there are I will resolve it. There are two parties who made a declaration. One is, on the one hand, by the way, you can see, well, it's human-generated content. It will tell you immediately that it's human-generated content. And here you can see that this declaration here is made by the original creator and rights holder, who is certified by a verifiable credential. So in this case, you can see it also from the, let's say, redirect link that points to the website of the photographer with other images of horses. But that kind of website is part of the verifiable credential, which underwent domain verification. So it says like, oh, the party who made that declaration also controls this web domain and publishes their content here, while the first declaration here, or which is situated on the top, is made by me. I don't claim to be the original creator or rights holder, and but I still present my verifiable credentials here. So this is the model that you can make public declarations, but these declarations come with a certificate or like a verifiable credential that allow you to kind of evaluate the status or the weight of this declaration.
And maybe if for argument's sake, if you were not a good actor and you had claimed the horse eye image as your own sometime in the past, what could the actual copyright owner in this case do in this environment to challenge or get back their rights?
If it's an unverified declaration, then you can do whatever you do now. There's nothing that will change in this case, right? When you have two claims where there's one that you think is improper or which is not based on the facts or on contracts, then you can reach out and identify the owner of this this verifiable credential and then go to court. These would be the steps that would be. So the ISCC declaration allows to attach a credential that allows to infer your identity in case and in case of a kind of a dispute, you would do what you would do now. I hope that answers
This just makes it easier to actually find them.
That's the point. And find the original. But original is hard to say because in a value chain, so it could be the author that makes a declaration legitimately. It could be the agent. It could be the publisher. It could be the intermediary, the distributor, Ingram. It could be Amazon. It could be even the reader that makes a declaration, adding a review and saying, okay, I like that book. So that could also, so you can make declarations for all kind of purposes. And depending on what you actually attach as metadata, there could be, let's say, the dispute arising. So I would say a declaration by itself is not, like in this example, is not problematic. It's the problematic when people would, it may not even be problematic if two people say, well, we have rights on that content because let's say the publisher and Amazon, they have both rights, different rights on content. But if it's a way to identify the entities that you are dealing with.
I just circling back at Jane after you provided the background on the per transaction question, asked a more broad-based, what about investing in the system itself or the solution? And I think that's part of the ISCC, but that Lisa, that's also something that you and your group are trying to think through, which is what is the overall solution so that the pieces fit together. Maybe start with Sebastian. I mean,
I think it's an important point, and it needs to be said that there are two kind of so on the one hand, you have the ISCC foundation and the ISCC standard, and everything that is related to the development of the identifier itself. And this is entirely open source and non-profit. So anyone can go to the GitHub of the ISCC Foundation, take the code, generate ISCC codes, and implement their use cases on their own without any kind of costs involved. So that's the ISCC Foundation, and we would be happy to kind of support anyone who's wants to implement ISCC within their system. That's a way to how ISCC Foundation is financed. On the other hand, I had the problem when I was talking to stakeholders and publishers to be on a very abstract level with ISCC, and that can be complicated. So my goal was to come up and create an application that actually can show it, that it works and how you can make public declarations and attach metadata to it. And Lithium itself, that's a commercial enterprise. It's a kind of a startup where we have two use cases. On the one hand, it's a B2C consumer application that you can see here, or a B2B service where you can generate the codes and make the declarations on your premise. So the content does not leave your servers, your premise, and that is kind of a plug-and-play solution that you can implement on your own within your environment. So these are the two kind of hats that I have on from time to time to say, like, ISCC, you can use. You can implement, you can build applications. We try to support it as much as possible. And on the one hand, it's an exemplary application to show what this tool, what this identifier actually can do.
And Lisa, this is something that you also are trying to sort through with your colleagues.
I think what we've talked about is that publishers could do this for themselves. They could integrate it into their own systems, or they could work with a third party who might be their distributor, who might be someone else to implement this. So there are hopefully going to be a variety of ways. We've been very mindful of the fact that for this to really work, it needs to work for everyone at every size, and there need to be options for how people could engage with it. All of the detail of exactly how that plays out, still some of it to be determined. As Sebastian says, the Lithium has put forward a model to show how technically this can be done, but we will see it evolve over time.
Great, thank you. There's Sebastian, quickly, there's a question from Jen that's just asking if we could share the presentation that you've given today. Would that be okay with you?
Yes, it is.
You nodded yes. Yes, thank you. A question that's kind of outside the realm of the digital. Mary was asking, how does this particular solution apply to print books? She notes that they're dealing with fake editions of print books on a major retailer, who's the offending parties are using their print-on-demand service.
So I think that this is one of the biggest ways that we initially identify counterfeit print editions is through those slightly changed covers, and there being another page for the title itself. And I've been working over the last several months, every time anything has been counterfeited, looking at comparing whether it was print or digital, the cover on the fake to the cover that we originally sent out. And I found a really reliable way that you can use this technology to actually see that they're very close to each other. the next sort of piece of that is really building into the searching that we're all doing to be able to look for things that are a close match, which hopefully would surface things earlier.
And Edson comes back and is asking, with respect to C2PA, actually more broadly, what other plugins are available, Sebastian? I think you showed a quick list, but maybe just to loop back to that.
Yeah, the idea of the plugins very quickly has been ISCC is very generic. So it addresses a multitude of use cases. And so the photographer, the stock photo companies, they have different metadata than publishers, obviously, and bands and songwriters, they have different metadata. So the idea is basically that the basic principle is that you generate an ISCC code and then make a declaration is always the same, but the metadata that you want to bind to the ISCC code is different. And so the plugin in the software is just a way to kind of decide per content, per media asset, what kind of metadata you would like to attach. That's the only thing, or what kind of use case you would like to attach. And currently we have been testing and discussing a lot with news publishers and news agencies, and because of the topic of fake news and disinformation, which is a major use case also for the tool. That you can identify the original post and reference it in fake situations, or can identify the fake content. I mean, this is just, you see my screen still, right? You know, you're familiar with that meme, which is funny, right? That you can see, okay, you click on it and immediately you can see, oh, it's algorithmic media, it's generated AI. But I think in this case, it's no fun, where content is being proliferated and sold that should depict a war or crisis situations. And there it's really important to have like immediate information about whether content has been AI generated or is fake or not. So this is just a long answer to your question. The plugins, you decide which kind of plugins you want to activate for your content and which metadata you want to bind to it.
We're just about at time, but we do have one question I wanted to pose for you both, Lisa and Sebastian. Ceylon is saying, you know, clearly a terrific tool with immediate use and application, and is asking, you know, what other approaches are you seeing or tracking, and if there is a perspective on anything that we might expect in the U.S. regulatory environment. I think I could probably answer that on my own, but I'm going to ask Lisa first. So what else are we looking at? And
I think that you know, we don't know what's going to happen next in the U.S. regulatory environment. And there's nothing that we've seen so far that is 100% implementable today to really offset all of this. And we're just at the beginning of starting to develop and evolve tools and methods that will help us to figure out how to fight the proliferation of AI generated content and the counterfeiting of published content.
And Sebastian, you've been looking at this longer than most of us, you know, but you remain optimistic.
Sure. I mean, the main point that I tried also to make in the slides. So in the European context, we have the AI Act and we have the Copyright Directive, which are pretty solid, I would say, to protect publishers from that their content would not be used for AI training. In the US, it would be of interest, I think, to two things: to see whether it would make sense to make a declaration under the European regime in case your content is being accessible globally and to European users, and AI is being used in Europe. So that is something that lawyers can only answer. But I would assume that if the New York Times would lock down their web domains and say do not train on the websites, the content is still accessible in Europe on library pages, on different other in different other ways. So it needs to be a global kind of solution and not a local solution. So I would ask first whether it would be an idea to make a declaration anyhow, because companies like OpenAI would say, oh, we respect your opt-out declaration once we are able to read it. And the second point is, if you have the chance to talk with AI companies when they approach you to license your content, tell them to generate ISCC codes so that you can decide whether what content you want to offer to them or not. That would be my suggestion. And I know a lot of media organizations that already talk with AI providers, and that would be a way I think that could work.
So I think that we could probably pick up our programming for the second half of this year just by this last question alone. But I do want to thank you, Lisa, both for bringing your perspective and also for the dedicated work that you put into both the W3C and the Publishing Business Group, as well as this Anti-Counterfeit Task Force. Sebastian, it's always a pleasure to have you, and thank you very much for sharing your perspective on how to use the ISCC for good and not for evil. We'll see you again soon.
Thanks for having me.
And for folks who are on the webinar, we'll get you a recording and Sebastian's slides sometime probably early next week. Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye.